Hello, today we are learning Nutanix Multicloud Infrastructure, and I decided to start with the last page and go to the first page. Okay, so how many S3 targets buckets are supported for Prism Central Point in time backups? Correct answer is 1, and you can configure only one S3 bucket for those backups. Target is destination S3 specific bucket where backups go. In Nutanix, an S3 target refers to an object storage destination, such as an S3 bucket used to store backups. Objects versus files versus volumes. Object storage S3 API used for backups, archives, large unstructured data. How you can access it through API. Examples: backups, logs, images, AI datasets. Files, Nutanix files, file storage, NAS, shared folders over network. NFS, Linux, SMB, Windows, protocols. Examples: shared drives. And volumes, volume groups. Block storage, SAN, like raw disks attached to server virtual machines. Protocols, ISCSI. Examples: databases, applications needing raw disk. Volumes, databases, files, shared folders, objects, backups. Okay, let's go to the next question. An administrator manages a Nutanix cluster with software data at rest encryption enabled using an external KMS. Several VMS are configured with virtual TPM. TPM stands for and KMS. TPM to support Windows BitLocker encryption. The administrator needs to perform a disaster recovery operation and restore virtual machines on a different cluster. During the recovery, the administrator discovers that the encryption key backup file is unavailable. What is the expected outcome for the virtual trusted platform module enabled virtual machines? And trusted platform module is a security chip virtual device, stores encryption keys securely. In Nutanix, you usually use virtual trusted platform module inside a virtual machine required for BitLocker, secure boot features, and credential guard. What it does: protects secrets, keys, passwords, certificates. Key management server, KMS. What it is: a system that stores and manages encryption keys. Used for data at rest encryption, key rotation, centralized key control. KMS is external system. TPM inside virtual machine and holds keys for that virtual machine. KMS manages and protects keys globally. Example: BitLocker uses virtual trusted platform module, and Nutanix cluster encryption uses key management server. And the correct answer is D. The virtual machines will fail to start because the virtual trusted platform module keys cannot be recovered without the backup file. why virtual will fail without a backup file. Because the virtual trusted platform module contains encryption keys that cannot be recreated. What virtual trusted platform module actually stores: BitLocker keys, security secrets, boot integrity data. During restore, disaster recovery scenario, when you move or restore a virtual machine to another cluster, the virtual machine tries to access its original trusted platform keys. Those keys are not stored inside the virtual machine disk. They are stored separately, secured. So what if we have VTPM keys and we don't need backup? Will that still fail? If keys are accessible, no problem. Okay, but here was the scenario with software data at rest encryption enabled using an external KMS. Okay. Several virtual machines are configured with virtual TPM to support Windows BitLocker encryption. The administrator needs to perform a disaster recovery operation. Oh, okay, disaster recovery, and restore the virtual machine on a different cluster. During the recovery, the administrator discovers that the encryption key backup file is unavailable, and there were the keys. Okay. And hold on. Okay, that's perfect. Maybe a little bigger. And that's enough. An administrator is trying to move an asynchronous PD workload from one cluster to another by taking advantages of PDDR based disaster recovery. When an error message is displayed in Prism, error updating protection domain, okay. Updating protection domain. Protection domain is already active on source side cluster name. Please trigger. Where is the? Why I cannot move this to the side? Hello. Okay, it's here. Please trigger migrate from source side to activate the protection domain. What would cause this error? Must promote the secondary side first before activating. Must disable first before trying to activate a protection domain. Virtual machine must be migrated from the virtual machine page instead of disaster recovery, trying to activate the PD while the primary cluster is reachable. I don't know. I'm guessing D? Okay, D. It had the most sense. Because if it's already activated, what it says, there is no need to activate it. Next question. I have to make it a little smaller. Okay, that should be good. An administrator is configuring runway analysis settings in Prism Central and selects Auto Detect under reserve capacity for failure. How will runway capacity be calculated in this configuration? And this is answer D. The runway analysis excludes the resources of the largest node, so estimates account for a node failure. The runway analysis excludes the resources of the largest node, so estimates account for a node failure. Is configured analysis settings in Prism Central and select Auto Detect under reserve capacity for failure. How will runway capacity be calculated in this configuration? So estimates account for a node failure. Let's ask chat YD Auto Detect reserve capacity for failure means Prism Central automatically reserves enough capacity to survive a node failure. How it calculates runway? It, instead of guessing or using a fixed percentage, it removes the largest nodes from calculation. So CPU memory storage are calculated as if that node is gone. What makes sense? The largest node failing, worst scenario. Can your cluster still operate if the biggest node disappears? What can be that biggest node out of curiosity? What's the biggest node? Storage. The node with the highest amount of resources in the cluster based on storage capacity, memory, CPU. In practice, Prism Central looks at the node that contributes the most usable capacity overall. The node with the most storage ends up being the largest. Example. So here would be node 1, the largest node. The largest node is one with the highest resource capacity, typically storage. And Prism excludes it to simulate a worst case node failure. If nodes are equal, they subtract one node. If unequal, subtract the biggest. How runway changes? Okay, so D, the runway analysis excludes the resources of the largest node and estimates account for a node failure. Next question. An administrator receives intermediate virtual input-output latency complaints from two application teams that share the same Acropolis hypervisor cluster. In Prism Central, multiple performance-related alerts appear across the same 30 minutes window, but only some virtual machines are impacted. The administrator needs to collect the most relevant platform logs for escalation, minimizing noise, and ensuring the bundle covers the exact time window when the alert condition occurred. The organization also requires that the log bundle can be attached to a support case without manual repackaging. Which approach best satisfies the requirement? D. In the alert details, identify impacted entities and timestamps, collect logs for the relevant time window, and upload the bundle using a case number upload option. Across the same 30 minutes window, but only some virtual machines are impacted. The administrator needs to collect the most relevant platform logs for escalation, minimizing noise, and ensuring the bundle covers the exact time window when the alert condition occurred. The organization also requires that the log bundle can be attached to a support case without manual repackaging. In the alert details, identify impacted entities and timestamps, collect logs for the relevant time window, and upload the bundle using a case number upload option. Let's go to the next question. An administrator has been tasked with migrating virtual machines out of storage container that isn't using compression and is using a non-standard naming convention. The administrator needs to do other administrative tasks during the virtual disk live migration. What administrative tasks can the administrator perform during the virtual disk live migration? He can do snapshot, clone, backup, or resize the virtual machine. He cannot do protection domain based replication or update memory. An administrator is using Nutanix Move to migrate 10 virtual machines and has manually changed the preparation mode for 2 of the virtual machines. What preparation mode will be used within migration plan? Mixed. I will ask why mixed? Automatic Move handles everything. Manual, you configure things yourself. What the question says. Okay, because administrator has 10 virtual machines to move, but he changed preparation mode for 2 manually, so that's why it will be mixed. So some stay automatic, some manual, more than one mode at the same time, so mixed. After logging into Prism Central, an administrator observes that there are a large number of constrained virtual machines. What does this indicate about virtual machines? Alerts, 513 anomalies, 15 warnings, runway 0 days, inefficient virtual machines, 21. That's why they are lacking in sufficient resources. Over provision, constrained. Inefficient means they need more CPU. And what about Constraints. Constrained virtual machines, they need more resources. Okay. CPU too low, memory too low, storage input-output limited. Symptoms: high CPU ready, high latency, slow performance fixed, increased CPU, RAM, I/O, PS. Inefficient virtual machines, resources are not used properly, waste or imbalance. Not always need more CPU, it can be over-provisioned, too much, low usage, misconfigured, imbalanced. It's about optimization, not just shortage. Constrained, add resources. Inefficient, poor usage. Constrained, starving. Inefficient, wasting. Next question. An administrator needs to adjust the settings of an existing virtual machine. Which parameter is restricted from modification once the virtual machine has been created? Which parameter is restricted from modification? The settings of an existing. Why? Why BIOS? BIOS stands for, I forgot. Is set when the virtual machine is created, right? It defines how the OS boots. It affects disk layout, MBR, GPT. It ties into secure boot, virtual trusted platform module. Changing it later would break boot process, make operating system unbootable. Nutanix does not allow changing BIOS after creation. Virtual machine count can change, memory can change, boot priority can change. Okay, it's basic. BIOS stands for Basic Input Output System. BIOS initializes hardware, starts the boot process, loads the operating system. Okay, let's move. After logging, is this the same question? Okay. What should be done once Prism Central is restored? Replace the certificate? Why? Because it's compromised? Why? Because it is compromised. The system may come back with old expired certificates, certificates that don't match the current environment, certificates that may no longer be trusted by browsers or integrations. So you must regenerate the certificate to restore secure communication. HTTPS, APIs, integrations. Is it because it's compromised? Not necessarily. This is important. It's not assumed compromise. It's about trust, validity, and consistency after restore. What happens if you don't replace it? Browser warnings, untrusted certificate, API failures. But in first place, why would you have to restore? If it wasn't compromised, then what? What happened that you have to restore the Prism Central? If it becomes unavailable or unusable. Common reasons: virtual machine system failure, crash, corrupted files, failed upgrade, disaster, infrastructure, power outage. Oh, that's what I said. Data center failure, storage corruption, upgrade failure, rollback, upgrade breaks something, security incident, less common but possible, misconfiguration, credential, human error, deleted configs, broken policies, wrong changes, management plane, brain of the environment. Prism Central is management plane. What still works when Prism Central is down? What works versus what breaks when Prism Central is down? Cluster is an element of Prism. It's a data plane. Prism Central is a management plane. What still works? Virtual machines keep running. Storage continues. Networking continues. Replication, that was protection. Domain continues. Snapshot continues. Core infrastructure is not affected. What breaks? Centralized management cannot manage multiple clusters from one UI. Automation versus playbook. Intelligent operation playbooks stop. No auto remediation. Runway analytics. No capacity forecasting. No insights. LCM centralized upgrades impacted. Calm self-service. App automation. What you can still do? You can log into Prism element directly. LCM stands for, and runway, is that just analytics? List runway components. So, lifecycle management, LCM. Upgrading and maintaining Nutanix. Runway in Nutanix is capacity analytics. Is a capacity analytics feature that predicts how long resources will last. It analyzes historical usage trends to forecast future consumption. It calculates runway separately for CPU, memory, and storage. It uses a time-based prediction expressed in days remaining. It incorporates growth rate trends from recent data, for example, past 21 days. It can reserve capacity for failure using auto-detect or manual settings. Auto-detect accounts for failure by excluding the largest node's resources. It factors in current utilization levels along with growth pattern. It highlights risks such as resource exhaustion and capacity bottleneck. It provides actionable insights to support capacity planning and scaling decisions. Okay, next question. An administrator is tasked with configuring a remote site for data protection. At the source site, the virtual machines are in a storage container named marketing, but they need the data to be replicated to a storage container named backups. At the destination site, What must be configured in order to accomplish this goal? Remote site for data protection. At the source side, the virtual machines are in the storage container named marketing, but they need the data to be replicated to a storage container. What must be configured? Virtual store mapping. Why? Source container marketing. Destination container backups. In Nutanix disaster recovery, replication expects same container names on both sides. If names don't match, replication fails or cannot place data correctly. What virtual store mapping does? Map the source container to a different container at destination. Data goes to correct container. So virtual store mapping. Okay. An administrator needs to give a user group access to resources from multiple clusters. Which action must be performed in Prism Central? A. Configure Nutanix projects. Resources from multiple clusters. Which action must be performed? Projects. Projects in Nutanix are used to organize resources and control access for different teams or users. What a project does. Are used to organize resources and control access. Okay. What a project does, it groups virtual machines, network, storage users, and applies permissions, quotas, and policies. Why projects are used? Multi-team environments, dev, test, production, security and access control. Example, project dev, access. So it's like PAM. Access control. Projects are similar to what function? Identity and access management, maybe? Okay, role-based access control. Projects. Okay, next question. So, configure Nutanix projects. An administrator has configured a virtual switch with active-active bond, type with MAC pinning, balance SLB, I forgot what is SLB, simple load balancer is load balancer. Bond type. The network team enables LACP. Yeah, source load balancing. Okay. Let's see, LACP. The network team enables LACP on the top of rack switches connected to the Nutanix nodes. After the switch change, network throughput degrades. What is most likely cause? What is the most likely cause? Balance storage. No, source load balancing must not be used with link aggregation protocols such as LACP. Why? Because they use different load balancing logic and will conflict. Acropolis hypervisor decides traffic locally, pins each virtual machine to a NIC. LACP stands for link aggregation control protocol. Link aggregation control protocol is switch plus coordinate together. Traffic is distributed based on hashing, requires switch configuration. What happens if you mix them? Both sides try to control traffic. Acropolis hypervisor sends traffic on one NIC. Switch expects LACP hashing behavior. Results: packet traps, out of order traffic, poor performance. Key concept: only one load balancing method should control traffic. Okay. Next question. A Windows virtual machine will be cloned repeatedly, and each clone needs operating system level customization during deployment. What is the most efficient method to accomplish this task? Why guest customization profile? The guest customization profile is the correct answer. Virtual machine will be cloned repeatedly. Each clone needs OS level customization. So the best solution is to automate customization at deployment. That's exactly what a guest customization profile does. Says host names, IP configuration, domain join, script settings applied automatically during cloning. Why others options are wrong? Template for each deployment, not efficient, too many templates. Create virtual machine from snapshot, no automatic customization. A clone and manually configure, slow, not scalable. Makes sense. An administrator needs to move a running virtual machine to another host in the same cluster without shutting it down. So it needs to be a live migration. Which is the best way to achieve this task? Live migrate within the cluster. Okay, that was easy. That was probably the only one question I knew. An administrator wants to define a set of conditions and approvers that must be satisfied before a deployment can proceed. Which component must be enabled? Policy engine. I'm gonna copy this. Low copy? No problem. Screenshot. Okay. YA. Define conditions, require approvals. The question is about. That is exactly what Policy Engine does in Nutanix Prism Central. Enforces rules before actions, supports approval workflows, conditional checks, governance controls. It can block or allow deployments based on rules. If virtual machine size is bigger than X, require manager approval. If environment equals production and leads to require 2 approvals. Deployment won't proceed until conditions are met. Conditions are at Policy Engine. Okay. A corporate security policy mandates strict protection against boot-level rootkits and requires the isolation of NTLM password hashes from the running operating system to prevent pass-the-hash attacks. During the initial testing phase, the administrator deploys a test virtual machine using the standard Acropolis hypervisor creation workflow. While configuring the guest operating system, administrator attempts to enable Windows Defender Credential Guard via group policy. However, the feature fails to start, and the system logs indicate that the underlying virtualization platform does not meet the necessary hardware security requirements. Which specific configuration change must the administration apply to the virtual machine to satisfy the security policy requirements? D. Enable UEFI firmware. Check the Secure Boot option and add a Virtual Trusted Platform module. Device. YD. So, NTLM stands for New Technology LAN Manager. This is a Microsoft authentication protocol used to verify user identity, allow login to systems and services. How it works, basic idea. Instead of sending your password directly, system sends a challenge. Your system responds using a hash password. This is called challenge response authentication. Why it's mentioned in your question. The policy says protect against pass-the-hash attacks. That attack targets New Technology LAN Manager hashes. What is pass-the-hash? Attacker steals New Technology LAN Manager password hash, uses it to authenticate without knowing the actual password. Very dangerous in Windows environments. Credential guard is needed because it isolates New Technology LAN Manager hashes, stores them securely using Virtual Trusted Platform module, prevents attackers from stealing them, and why your virtual machine failed. The question says platform does not meet hardware security requirements, means virtual machine is missing UEFI Secure Boot Virtual Trusted Platform module. So you need UEFI Secure Boot Virtual Trusted Platform. What the question requires: protect against boot level rootkits, protect against pass-the-hash, enable credential guard. That means strong boot security, hardware backend key protection. What is required for this to work? UEFI firmware. Boot level rootkit. That means strong boot security, hardware backend key protection. D includes all required components. UEFI stands for Unified Extensible Firmware Interface. This is model replacement for that was basic input-output system. Boot input-output system. What is a boot level rootkit? It's a malware that infects the boot process before OS starts, runs before Windows and Linux load, hides from antivirus and operating system defenses. Why it's dangerous? Loads very early, hard to detect, can control the system at a low level. So how answer D can protect against rootkit? Because it enables the full secure boot chain. UEFI Foundation for Secure Boot replaces legacy. Secure boot main protection. This is the key piece. Only signed, trusted bootloaders are allowed. Prevents malware from inserting itself before the operating system. Protects integrity and secrets. Why rootkits fail here? A boot level rootkit needs to run before operating system. Needs to inject into boot chain, but secure boot checks signatures. And trusted code is refused execution. Okay. Again, it's an input-output system. B is basic. Yes, basic. Next question. An administrator needs to be able to use remaining capacity for storage and memory. What settings should the administrator set to accomplish this? Needs to be enabled. Oh, needs to be able to use remaining capacity for storage and memory. What settings should the administrator set to accomplish this? Rebuild capacity reservation and high availability. Why C? Storage capacity. Rebuild. Why rebuild? Remaining capacity. Why? What settings should the administrator set to accomplish this? Use remaining capacity for storage and memory. Don't waste reserved resources. Allow system to use capacity unless failure happens. Controls how much storage is reserved for failures. If enabled, reservation, some storage is locked reserved. If properly configured, system can use more usable capacity. It ensures enough space to rebuild data after failure, but not unnecessary over reserve. High availability. Handles memory. Failover protection. So rebuild happens on its own, because rebuild means building something from reshaping from whatever there is. When a node, yes, rebuild happens automatically. What rebuild means? When a node or disk fails, some data copies are lost. Nutanix needs to recreate those copies. That process rebuilds. How it works? System detects failure, starts rebuilding data on other healthy nodes, uses remaining cluster capacity. Why rebuild capacity reservation matters? Rebuild needs free space. If you reserve capacity, rebuild is guaranteed. Rebuild is automatic, but it still needs available resources. So SRC, rebuild capacity, reservation, and high availability. Next question. Which interface must be used to create a container with replication factor 1? Prism element. Short answer. Replication factor 1 is used in Prism element mainly for non-critical or test scenarios to save storage, not for protection. What replication factor means? Only one copy of data, non-redundancy. If a disk node fails, data can be lost. Why you would use replication factor 1 in Nutanix Prism element? You don't need high availability. Want to save storage, performance, capacity testing, no overhead of replication. Temporary workloads, short-lived virtual machines, easy to recreate. So this one has one failure. If you have replication factor 2, you have one failure. If you have 3, you have 2 failures, because always one must work. So which interface must be used to create a container? Prism element. Prism element allows RF replication factor 1 configuration. Replication factor 1 is used in Prism element for non-critical workloads where storage efficiency is prioritized over data protection. Element is Prism element is the management interface for a single Nutanix cluster. What you use it for? Manage virtual machines, configure storage containers, monitor performance, set networking, run LCM lifecycle management upgrades, all at the cluster level. Prism element per cluster control. Prism element versus Prism Central. Scope: one cluster, multiple clusters. Prism Central. Focus: operations, Prism Central. Management: use case, daily admin tasks. A Prism Central. Global view policies, daily admin tasks. Prism element: control panel for one building. Prism Central: control center for entire city. Okay, next question. An administrator has 16 hosts in a cluster, including 4 undersized, older hosts that need to be removed from the cluster. Unfortunately, new servers will take more than 6 months to be procured. What policy should be defined within Prism Central to prevent 5 missions critical virtual machines from ever running on the older hosts? Anti-affinity policy. From ever running on the older host. YC will prevent that. So anti-affinity policy means that two virtual machines cannot be on the same host. So prevent critical virtual machines from running on specific old hosts. Anti-affinity does. These virtual machines must not run on these hosts. Select the 5 critical virtual machines, select the 4 old hosts. Policy enforces those virtual machines will never be placed there. Old hosts, unreliable, undersized. You want to exclude them. Anti-affinity, block placement. Virtual host affinity, opposite, forces virtual machine to run on specific hosts. Virtual machine, anti-affinity. Keeps virtual machines separate from each other. Nothing to do with host. D. Forces virtual machines to run together. Okay. How many storage pools and storage containers are created during cluster creation? D. 1 pool, 2 containers. Oh God. Why? So, what happens during cluster creation? Nutanix default. 1 storage pool. All disks from all nodes are combined into 1 shared storage pool. 2 storage containers. Nutanix automatically creates self-service container and images. Why 2 containers? 1 pool, 2 containers. They separate workloads. Self-service container used for virtual machines, main workloads, images container used for ISO files, templates, and images. Why other answers are wrong? 2 pools, not default. 3 containers, only 2 are created initially. Storage pool, big storage warehouse, containers, a section inside it. 1 warehouse, 2 sections. Okay, so this is just a default. 1 pool, 2 containers. An administrator is building a migration plan to Nutanix Acropolis hypervisor. What can Nutanix migrate? Answer A, virtual machines. File shares to files, NSX, local manager to FNS. What all shortcuts stand for? Virtual machines, software-based computers running on a hypervisor. NSX, Virtual Machine Ware, NSX, Network Virtualization Platform. Provides virtual networking security microsegmentation. FNX, Flow Network Security, Nutanix Flow. Nutanix Flow. Flow Network Security. Nutanix Network Security microsegmentation controls traffic between virtual machines, file shares to files. Not an acronym, but means migrating from one file storage system to another. Quick summary: virtual machine network virtualization. FNS, Flow Network Security. NSX stands for does not officially stand for anything. Why those files can be migrated versus others not. What can Nutanix Move migrate? Core role. Nutanix Move migrates things it can things it can understand and recreate. It can read the data, convert it, rebuild on Nutanix, then it can migrate it. What can be migrated and why? Virtual machines, because fully supported standard format, disks plus config. Move can copy disks, convert formats, recreate virtual machines on Acropolis hypervisor, straightforward. File shares, Nutanix files, works because files, simple data, folders, files. Move can copy, permissions, structure, no complex dependencies. NSX, Flow limited case, only partially supported. Why? Flow. Both deal with network security policies. Some mappings can be translated. Only basic structures, not everything. What cannot be migrated and why? Complex networking configs. Too vendor specific, cannot be translated cleanly. Hardware dependent features, physical devices. Hardware dependent features, that's for sure. Complex networking configs, too vendor specific. Unsupported services. Some app levels configs. Nutanix Move can migrate data that is standardized and convertible. Okay. So, virtual machines, file shares to files, NSX, which is Flow, local manager to FNS. Wait, NSX is what? And And F and S is flow, right? NSX, full networking. FNS is flow. FNS is security. NSX is full networking. So networking to security can be moved. NSX builds networks. Flow, no. Microsegmentation, yes. Vendor virtual machine, VMware, NSX. And FNX is Nutanix. NSX builds the whole city. FNS controls traffic rules. Nutanix flow. NSX is a full network virtualization platform. Network virtualization, NSX. Security between virtual machines, FNS. Next question. An administrator is tasked with creating disaster recovery plan between two clusters within Prism Central Local AZ. To ensure a failover operation is successful, the administrator also needs the ability to test recovery in both directions. What are the recommended networks required between the two clusters for successfully testing the recovery? C. Two production networks and 2 test networks. A plan between 2 clusters with Prism. Why C? What happens to NSX configs during Nutanix move? Core truth. NSX configures are not fully migrated. Virtual machine specific networking. Nutanix uses flow, not NSX. Different architectures. What move can do? Basic networking mapping. Virtual machine NICs, IP addressing. Basic connectivity is preserved. Simple security, very limited. In some cases, basic rules can be interpreted, but not guaranteed. What move cannot migrate? Logical switches, routers, balancers, distributed firewalls, advanced NSX features, tags, security groups, dynamic policies. What you must do after migration? Recreate everything manually in Nutanix Flow. That includes security rules, segmentation, network design. Why this happens? NSX and Nutanix use different models. NSX Virtual VMware SDN, Nutanix Acropolis Hypervisor plus Flow, no one-to-one translation. You move iPhone to Android, contracts transfer, Apple settings, no. You must reinstall. Virtual machines move, data moves, bad. Networking configs, NSX, no. One line, NSX configurations are not migrated by Nutanix Move because they are VMware specific and must be manually recreated in Nutanix Flow after migration. An administrator is tasked with creating disaster recovery plan between 2 clusters with Prism Central Local AZ to ensure a failover operation is successful. An administrator also needs the ability to test recovery in both directions. Two production networks and 2 tests. What the question requires: 2 sites, cluster, and failover must. And it stopped working. And it stopped working. Oh gosh. Let's pause and resume. The question requires failover must work, test recovery in both directions. That means side A to side B to side A. Oh, it says in both directions. Okay. Key concept. Disaster recovery uses different networks, production networks, used during real failover. Virtual machines run normally. Users access services. Test network, used during test recovery. Isolated, no impact on production. Safe testing environment. Why you need two of each? Two production networks, one for side A, one for side B. And two tests, one for side A, one for side B. Because you are testing failover A to B, B to A, each side needs its own isolated test environment. Why fewer networks won't work? Cannot test both directions independently. Next question. An administrator needs to configure Open LDAP, link data aggregation protocol in Prism Central. Which type of account should the administrator use? An administrator needs to configure Open. Which type of account should the administrator? Service account. Why service account? Why D? These tasks require continuous access, non-interactive login, secure control permissions. That is exactly what a service account is designed for. What a service account is? Used for applications, automation, tools, scripts, not by a human user. Service accounts are used for automation integration because they have limited permissions, auditable, safer. Simple analogy: admin account, human user. Service account, robot doing tasks. Admin needs to configure service account. In the instruction, there were no such words. Configure Open LDAP. The system itself needs to authenticate and run tasks. Key logic the exam expects. Ask yourself, who will use this account? So again, YD. There were no such words. That advice that chat gave me didn't work. Configuring LDAP integration in Nutanix. This is system-to-system communication. Key principle, this is the clue. LDAP integration always needs a bind account. That is, a dedicated account used by the system, not a human service account. Why not others? Admin account, root account, too privileged. Admin account, human, Nutanix account, not relevant to external ADP. What is LDAP binding? The process of logging into the LDAP directory. When a system like Prism Central connects to LDAP, it must authenticate first. That step is called binding. Binding. Why binding is needed? LDAP won't allow searching users, reading groups, unless you are authenticated. Types of LDAP binding: simple bind, username plus password. Most common: anonymous bind, no credentials, limited access, not secure. SASL bind, advanced secure methods. In Nutanix context, when you configure LDAP in Nutanix Prism Central, you provide bind, domain name, username, password. That is your service account. Simple analogy: LDAP database binding, logging in before searching. One line: LDAP binding is the process of authenticating to the directory using credentials before performing queries or authentication. Exempt trigger: LDAP configuration, bind, domain name, authentication. Think service account used for binding. Okay, next question. Faced with, hold on. No, it's too big now. Okay. Faced with prolonged times for hardware delivery, an administrator is looking for a way to be informed on time when cluster storage capacity is running low. In order for new hard disks to be delivered on time, the administrator needs to get a warning earlier than it is set currently. Which action should the administrator take to receive a warning about cluster storage capacity running low earlier? C. Decrease storage container space usage exceeded alert warning threshold. Oh God. Why C? You want a warning earlier than current. Just trigger sooner, right? Key concept: thresholds. Alerts trigger based on warning threshold. Critical threshold late. What decreasing the warning threshold does? current warning 80%. You change to 70. Now alert comes at 70%. Okay. Decreases storage pool capacity usage exceeded alert critical threshold. The critical alert critical threshold. To receive a warning about cluster storage capacity. Yeah, so warning must be decreased, not the critical alert, not warning, right? That's why not D. Why container matters. Alerts are typically based on storage container usage. There's where virtual machine data lives. Simply analogy. Warning, fuel low, light. You want it sooner. Lower the trigger level. One line. Decreasing the warning threshold causes alerts to trigger at a lower usage level, providing earlier notification of low storage capacity. Okay, that's why C. The administrator noticed in the past hour a virtual machine is showing CPU ready time below 5, memory swap rate more than 0 kilobytes per second. Host input output Stargate CPU's usage more than 85%. What type of virtual machine displays these characteristics? What type of virtual machine displays these characteristics? I remember that constrained virtual machine is when it needs more resources. Okay. Give me all characteristics of each term from the answers. In the answers. So inactive virtual machine, over-provisioned, constrained, and bully. Inactive is virtual machine is barely doing anything. Very low CPU, very low memory, low disk, low network, idle. Wasted resources, candidate for shutdown or consolidation. Over-provisioned virtual machine has more resources than it needs. Characteristics: low CPU usage but high allocated virtual CPU, so it has more than it needs. Low memory usage but large RAM assigned. No performance issues. Resources underutilized. Constrained, not enough resources. Starving. Characteristics: high CPU ready time, high memory pressure, high disk latency, slow performance. Requests waiting for resources, meaning needs more CPU RAM input output per second. Bully virtual machines, consumes too many resources, hurts others. Characteristics: high CPU, high disk, high network usage, causes contention for other virtual machines. Host resources heavily utilized, meaning needs throttling or isolating. Now apply to your question. You saw CPU ready time more than 5, hosts input output usage more than 85, swap 0, not memory issue. That indicates Resource contention, virtual competing for resources. Quick recognition. C is the answer, not D. Sign of CPU contention. What is that contention? The argument? Fight? Competing for the same limited resources. You are right to question that. Heavily loaded. Key interpretation. The virtual machine is waiting, affected by contention, by competing, not overusing resources itself. It is not the cause. Correct classification C. Constrained virtual machine. Why? Because a constrained virtual machine experiences resource shortage, shows high CPU ready, suffers from contention in the environment. Why not bully? Is the one causing high usage, would show high CPU usage, high input-output usage by itself. We don't see virtual machine hogging resources. We see it waiting. Okay. Hogging. One virtual machine is consuming a large share of a resource, leaving less for others. So it's like bully. Okay, next question. An administrator wants to run a workload at site A, but replicate it to 2 clusters with different RPOs. Recovery point objectives. Which replication option fits the needs? Wants to run a workload at site A, but replicate it to 2 clusters with different RPOs. Many to many. One side to many. One to many. An administrator needs to configure the virtual switch on a Nutanix Acropolis hypervisor cluster to maximize both per virtual machine and per host network throughput with LACP support. Which bond type should the administrator configure? Active. To maximize both per virtual machine and per host network throughput. Why B? Maximize throughput with LACP. Link aggregation control protocol combines multiple NICs into one logical link, uses both links simultaneously, requires active configuration, uses all uplinks at the same time, distributes traffic across links, per virtual machine throughput, per host throughput. Next question. Which storage optimization method is recommended for full clone virtual desktop interface workloads? B. Capacity deduplication. Which storage optimization method is recommended for full clone VDI? Capacity deduplication. Which storage optimization is recommended? Because it hold on, capacity deduplication means it removes the duplication. Capacity deduplication is a storage feature that eliminates duplicate data blocks to reduce how much physical storage is used. It keeps only one copy of identical data and references it whenever needed, improving storage efficiency. An administrator reverts a virtual machine to a recovery point using Prism Central. What is the expected behavior for the virtual machine's categories and ownership after the revert? What is the expected behavior? Reverts a virtual to recovery point. C. Both the virtual machine's categories and ownership are presented at their current state. Why not A? If it goes back literally to recovery state point. What actually gets reverted versus what stays? Categories and ownership. Recovery reverts a virtual machine to recovery point. What is expected behavior for? Oh, of course it stays at the current state. It's not gonna change. It's gonna be the same. Categories are part of policy state metadata tied to protection. They do reverse to match recovery point. Ownership is current administrative metadata. Current administrative metadata related to RBAC is not reverted. It stays as current. No. Correct answer is C. So VM data reverts, disk state reverts, but categories and ownership, no. An administrator has noticed that the cluster consists of 4 full non-volatile memory nodes. Which expansion path is supported? B. 4 full non-volatile. One all non-volatile memory node with 96 is terabyte. It's not terabyte, it's tebibyte. Okay, with 96 tebibyte raw capacity. All non-volatile with which expansion path is supported? Why B? Your cluster full non-volatile, all nodes use non-volatile memory. You must maintain the same storage type when expanding. Key concept, cluster consistency. YB is correct. Non-volatile, all nodes use non-volatile. Nutanix rule. You must maintain the same storage time when expanding. One all matches existing cluster, keeps performance. But why one? There are 4. One all unvolatile node. One node, not because there are 4. The number for existing nodes does not matter. Of 4 full non-volatile nodes. Which expansion path is supported? You can expand cluster by adding nodes one at a time. Minimum cluster 3 nodes. After that, you can add 1 node, 2 nodes more. So why 1 is correct? One all non-volatile node that satisfies correct storage, valid expansion. Why it's not about matching 4 or keeping even numbers? Okay. Now I'm going to read through all questions without explaining because of the time limits. Okay, let's go. An administrator needs to protect a volume group using a protection policy that supports a recovery point objective of 1 hour. The environment consists of 2 clusters in different geographic regions. Which replication type should be used? Asynchronous. An administrator is tasked with using Nutanix Move to migrate a virtual machine from Hyper-V to Nutanix Acropolis hypervisor. What must be deployed on the Hyper-V host to facilitate migration? Hyper-V to Nutanix Acropolis hypervisor. D. Nutanix Move agent. Next question. When the administrator attempts to configure a volume group and connect an external ISCSI initiator, the connection fails. Which cluster configuration step did the administrator most likely miss? B. Configuration the data services IP address on the cluster. Connection fails. An administrator added an SSH public key and verified connectivity to CVMs and Acropolis hypervisor. What is the recommended next step to reduce interactive access risk? Disable password authentication for all CVMs and Acropolis hypervisor hosts. And CVM, come on, stands for controller virtual machine. 77. Refer to the exhibit, directory list, authentication types, client, directory type, active directory, name, test Nutanix. An administrator is configuring Active Directory authentication in Prism element and wants to ensure all traffic is encrypted. Which port should the administrator use? Oh boy. What is 636? So 636 is this is a port used for link data aggregation protocol security. It's used over SSL, TLS encrypted. Provides encrypted LDAP communication using SSL, TLS. All right. Okay. Can move this. Okay, now it's good. So 636. Next question. An administrator configures network segmentation and places the data services IP in a secondary non-routable subnet while the cluster is registered to Prism Central. Prism Central cannot initiate or complete cluster upgrades. How should the administrator resolve this issue? Secondary non-routable subnet while the cluster is registered to Prism cannot initiate or complete cluster upgrades. That's true. How should the administrator resolve? Configure an additional data service IP within the original subnet used for PC communication. Okay. An administrator needs to protect a set of workloads across 3 sites, ABC, managed by different Prism Central instances. Which is the most efficient way to protect such virtual machines? C. Create 3 different protection policies, 1 per Prism Central. Okay. An administrator needs to enable software data address encryption on a 2-node robo cluster. The organization requires that encryption keys are stored on premise outside of the cluster, which key management service type should the administrator configure? External KMS. ROBO stands for Remote Office Branch Office, a small Nutanix cluster deployed at remote offices branch locations. Run workloads locally at remote sites, reduce latency, avoid sending everything to main data centers. Robo cluster. External, okay. 73. While configuring a remote site for protection, I think that was protection domain based disaster recovery, an administrator elects to skip virtual store mapping, assuming the same container names don't exist on 2 sites. What is the expected behavior of data placement at the remote site for replication? Replication failed to complete. Why it will fail? You skipped vStore mapping. Container names are different. How Nutanix replication works. In PD-based disaster recovery, source container must map to a destination container. Nutanix tries to match same container name, source, destination, marketing backups. No mapping configured. If names don't match, where should I put this data? Replication cannot place data, so it fails. Next question. An administrator has been asked to deploy a single node Prism central virtual machine with the possibility to scale out to increase its capacity. What is the minimum supported Prism central size? A, small. Okay. An administrator detects suspicious outbound connection from a single virtual machine that hosts a web tier component. The incident response requirement is to immediately quarantine the virtual machine so it cannot communicate with any other workload, but still allow connectivity from a designed forensic tooling group so investigators can collect evidence. The organization uses categories for policy scope and wants a change that can be applied quickly during an incident without redesigning existing policies. Which action best meets the requirement? A. Assign the virtual machine to the built-in quarantine category with the forensic value, so quarantine behavior blocks traffic expect to and from forensic tools. Forensic, quarantine and forensic, those are the key words. to memorize. Okay. What is the minimum number of 80 terabyte capacity nodes that must be added to the cluster to fulfill this requirement? Nutanix minimum for data protection, RF2, 3 nodes. Key concept, replication factor. Data is stored in 2 copies, must survive 1 node failure. But how do we know we are talking about RF2? It doesn't say that explicitly in the instruction. Default assumption, replication factor 2. Okay. Let me take this window here. Okay. Okay, cool. An administrator is troubleshooting intermittent virtual machine input-output stalls that appear across hosts and clusters. The issue is sporadic, and the administrator needs to rapidly collect the correct platform logs for deeper analysis and possible escalation. The administrator wants to use a supported mechanism designed for efficient log collection and must ensure that the environment prerequisites are met so the tool can be used successfully. Which option correctly describes the supported approach and key prerequisite? A. Use log bay to collect logs, which is available once the node has a central virtual machine deployed or the Acropolis hypervisor compute node has been added to the cluster. Compare CVM to Acropolis hypervisor. Which service is part of Prism Central Backup? NCM self-service. What is NCM self-service and what does it stand for? Acropolis hypervisor runs virtual machines. Central virtual machine, the brain of storage cluster. Bare metal and special virtual machine Nutanix services. Clean comparison. Central virtual machine. What it is? Virtual machine hypervisor. Role: storage cluster services runs virtual machines. Runs on Acropolis hypervisor. Bare metal. User virtual machines. No, yes. Critical services. Yes. Stargate Curator etc. No. Can be restarted. Yes. No. Host level. CLI access. Yes. Yes. failure impact, storage, host, outage. What CVM actually does: Stargate handles input output, reads writes, curator, optimization, cleanup, balancing, Cassandra, metadata database. So when a virtual machine writes data, virtual machine to Acropolis, Acropolis to Central, Central distributes data across cluster. Nutanix Cloud Manager stands for NCM. It's a tool inside Nutanix that lets user deploy and manage applications, virtual machines themselves using automation without needing admins every time. Think cloud portal inside your company. What it actually does: with NCM self-service, you can deploy virtual machines or full applications from blueprints, automate workflows, approval, provisioning, scaling, give teams access, dev, quality analysis with permissions, create reusable templates, called blueprints, run tasks like start, stop, scale, update automatically. Example, real scenario: instead of "Hey IT, can you create 3 virtual machines?" log into Nutanix Cloud Manager. Yes, Manager. Click a blueprint, trip tier. It deploys everything automatically. I forgot what A stands for. Prism Central. Purpose: monitor, manage infrastructure, and NCM self-service, deploy, automate. Assurance, I forgot this word. Okay, so NCM self-service. Which service is part of Prism Central Backup? Next question. An administrator is configuring uplinks on an Acropolis hypervisor cluster and wants guest virtual machines to use bandwidth across multiple physical adapters without additional configuration on the physical switches. Which uplink bond type should the administrator choose? D. Balance, SLB, load balancing. SLB stands for which uplink? Source load balancing. Source load balancing. Which uplink bond type should the administrator choose? It's a load balancing method used in networking where traffic is distributed based on the source. Cluster wants bandwidth across multiple physical adapters without configuring the physical switches. So it's source based. An administrator would like to create a virtual machine template for reusability to simplify virtual machine management and improve security. When should the administrator apply a guest customization profile to simplify virtual machine management? A. When deploying a virtual machine with cloud in it, guest customization. When should the administrator apply a guest customization profile? When deploying a virtual machine with cloud in it, guest customization. Cloud Init is a tool that automatically configures a virtual machine when it boots for the first time. It's used to set up a virtual machine without manual logging or setup. When a virtual machine starts, Cloud Init can create user, set host name, install packages, networking, run scripts, configure security settings. what is the recovery point objective time in hours for Prism Central backups? B, 24 hours. Okay, that's easy to remember. The accounting department has been successfully utilizing erasure coding for a long time. During the weekend, there was a large increase in data usage. The administrator expected lower space usage on the storage container. What could be the cause of this low space savings? A, data services IP is not configured. A new cluster is being deployed for the accounting department with the following characteristics. There is a lot of infrequently used data. Data is critical for the company. The data is critical for the company. Fault tolerance too is required. The budget is tight. In addition to compression, which storage efficiency mechanism and minimum required number of nodes should the administrator configure? Erasure coding with 6 nodes. YA. Erasure coding is the most storage efficient option for infrequently used data, since it reduces storage overhead compared to replication. Fault tolerance requires more nodes. Erasure coding with fault tolerance too specifically needs a minimum of 6 nodes to maintain resilience. The duplication does not provide the same level of fault tolerance efficiency for this scenario, so erasure coding plus 6 nodes is the only option. An employee is complaining that a virtual machine is slow. Memory overcommit is enabled for this virtual machine. Though the virtual machine is actively using all its allocated memory, the guest operating system page file % usage is very low. What is the probable cause for this virtual machine being slow? The hypervisor is swapping. The hypervisor is swapping means the hypervisor does not have enough physical RAM, so it starts using disk storage as temporary memory. What actually happens? RAM is full. Hypervisor moves some memory pages to disk. When needed, reads them back from disk. Disk is much slower than RAM. Performance drops. Use which statement best describes? Oh, it's a new question. An administrator needs an account. An administrator needs an account for automation that can be granted granular permissions and being authenticated without an interactive user password. Which statement best describes how a Prism Central service account authenticates? D. Using a shared secret key managed through identity access management and can be assigned RBAC roles. Using a shared secret key managed through identity and access management and can be assigned RBAC roles. D. An administrator manages a shared Acropolis hypervisor environment where dev workloads must not exceed 2000 input-output per second per virtual machine during business hours to prevent noisy neighbor impact on pro The administrator already uses categories that to group virtual machines, for example, category and environment development, and wants a scalable approach that applies consistent throttling to all current and future dev virtual machines without configuring each virtual machine individually. Which approach best meets the requirement? Configure a storage policy with a quality of service throttling and associate the policy to the category used by dev virtual machines. And associate the policy to the category used by. An organization uses on-premises Acropolis hypervisor-based clusters and also use workloads in public cloud environments. The security team wants a single place to review security posture and compliance across the multi-cloud footprint, and they want the analysis to support security operations workflows rather than only showing cluster-level posture. The administrator needs to pick the most appropriate Nutanix capability for this requirement. Which option best aligns to the requirement? D. Use Security Central to provide visibility into security posture and compliance for a multi-cloud environment, including public clouds. Use Security Central to provide visibility into security posture and compliance for a multi-cloud environment, including public clouds. Why it's not going? Okay. An administrator decides to simplify volume group management by automatically enabling virtual disk load balancing for better performance. How can the administrator enable virtual disk load balancing by default for volume groups? D. Use the data services IP address for attached volume groups. A node in a 3-node cluster is running out of physical resources. All 3 nodes are equally configured. An administrator wants to live migrate virtual machines to another node, but is unable to do so. What is causing this issue? D. Virtual machines have GPU pass-through. Virtual machines have GPU pass-through. Next question. An administrator ran NCC checks. NCC stands for checks and notice the following failure. A Nutanix cluster check. Node XXX fail. No NTP servers. Servers are configured in the cluster. Configuration refer to kilobyte 4519. For details on check on NTP or recheck with NCC Nutanix cluster check. health checks, network checks, checks NTP. What is the minimum number of NTP servers that should be configured to be considered a good configuration that will ensure a high degree of accuracy? Network time protocol is NTP. Network time protocol works best with an odd numbers of servers, minimum 3, so it can compare time sources and eliminate outliers. If one server is wrong, with only 1 or 2 servers, there is no reliable way to detect which one is inaccurate. 3 provides the minimum quorum for accurate and fault-tolerant time synchronization. Okay. Let me check this. Okay. An administrator needs to change the band type on an existing virtual switch in a production Acropolis hypervisor cluster running critical workloads. The administrator wants to avoid any disruption to running virtual machines during the change. How should the administrator complete this task? Use the standard method to migrate virtual machines and apply changes sequentially to each node. Place all the nodes in maintenance mode simultaneously, then apply the bond type change. Use the quick method to apply changes without putting nodes into maintenance mode. Answer A. How should the administrator complete this task? Use the standard method to migrate virtual machines and apply changes sequentially to each node. An administrator needs to change the bond type on an existing virtual switch in production. Acropolis hypervisor cluster running critical workloads. The administrator wants to avoid any disruption to running virtual machines during the change. Use the standard method to migrate virtual machines and apply changes. Chat. What is the standard method to migrate virtual machines in Nutanix? Live migration within the same cluster. Okay. During an upgrade, the pre-check test, Acropolis hypervisor entering pinned virtual machines pre-check fails on a HV host. The administrator reviews the listed virtual machines and finds that one virtual machine is configured as an agent virtual machine. 2 virtual machines are running Windows Defender Credential Guard. One virtual machine has a virtual GPU enabled. Based on the behavior of this pre-check, which action is required to allow the host to enter maintenance mode and proceed with the lifecycle management upgrade, LCM. Management, yes, lifecycle management. D. Power off agent virtual machine, credential guard virtual machine, and pinned GPU enabled, and restart the upgrade. Okay, that's very logical. An administrator is tasked with moving a workload from one cluster to another cluster utilizing PD. Protection domain based disaster recovery because the source site is currently having intermittent network issues. How would the administrator accomplish the unplanned failover? D. Migrate on the source. Unplanned. An administrator has determined that the storage space is slow within Nutanix cluster environment. The container is set to replication factor 2. After deleting dozens of inactive virtual machines earlier today, the administrator notices no space reclamation. What could be the cause? C. Medusa only runs once every 24 hours. What is Medusa? It's a distributed storage service in Nutanix that actually stores and manages virtual machine data. It's responsible for storing virtual disks, replicating data, distributing data, handling data placement, and it updates every 24 hours. Stores, replicates, central virtual machine, Stargate. Stores, replicates data across nodes, where the data actually lives. Simple analogy. Acropolis hypervisor engines, central virtual machine, brain, Medusa, storage system. One line answer. Medusa is the Nutanix distributed storage system responsible for storing, replicating, and managing data. Space is not immediately reclaimed because background storage cleanup runs on a schedule. So this is just a schedule. Medusa is always running. Cleanup is scheduled. An administrator is migrating from a standalone XC host and needs to provide access to an Acropolis hypervisor storage container. How should the administrator complete this task? D. Add the XC host IP to file system whitelist. Access. Okay, makes sense. Logical. A company needs to comply with the new company policy requiring the use of an external cloud-based recovery point location. To accomplish this task, an administrator needs to strengthen the disaster recovery configurations. What is the most cost-efficient option? Enable multi-cloud snapshot technology. Okay. An administrator has configured central virtual machine security hardening on Nutanix cluster with the following settings. IP restriction state is set to enabled. Password-based SSH access is disabled via cluster lockdown. The administrator attempts to SSH into the central virtual machine from a new jump box, and the connection is refused. What should the administrator do to restore SSH access to the central virtual machine? C. Access the central virtual machine using the local console or serial access and update the SSH whitelisted address to the new jump box IP. Access using the local. Okay. The administrator observed the following Nutanix cloud check in a cluster running virtual desktop interface workloads. EC enabled check. Node info. Consider enabling erasure coding on container. Self-service container to get 26% space saving. Consider enabling on container default to get 22 space saving. What is the best course of action? Enable erasure coding on self-service container and leave it disabled on the default container. Chat, why do we use erasure coding for? Erasure coding is used to save storage space while still protecting data. Instead of copying full data like replication, it splits data into pieces, adds parity, extra info for recovery, spreads it across nodes so you can lose a disk node and still recover data. It saves storage, keep fault tolerance, best for cold infrequent data. Is used to provide fault tolerance while reducing storage overhead by storing data with parity instead of full replication. What does it mean, storing data with parity? Store extra, wait. It means you store extra calculated data, parity, along with the real data, so that if part of the data is lost, you can rebuild it. Extra calculated data, along with the real data. Could you give me an example of extra calculated data? Imagine you have 3 pieces. Instead of just storing ABC, you store 462. If B is lost, recovery B, read Solomon, advanced math, works even with multiple failures. Okay. The administrator expanded a Nutanix cluster repurposed nodes from the commissioned cluster. The administrator has validated the following: same number of cores, amount of memory and storage. The nodes are on the same subnet. The nodes are running the same version of iOS and Acropolis. After the nodes were added to the administrator discovered that virtual machines cannot be migrated to the recently added nodes. What would be the reason for this issue? C. The virtual machines were created on new generation of CPU and must be power cycled to renegotiate new features. An administrator manages a Nutanix cluster hosting a mixed workload environment including general purpose virtual machines and a specific group of high sensitivity PCIe DSS database servers. The cluster is currently configured with data at rest encryption disabled at global cluster level. A new security mandate requires that all data associated with the PCI DSS workloads must be encrypted at rest using dedicated external key management server for key rotation. The general purpose virtual machines, however, must remain unencrypted, avoid unnecessary encryption overhead. The administrator has already deployed and registered the required key management server instance. Which sequence of configuration steps should the administrator perform in Prism Central to meet this specific encryption requirement? C. Create a new storage policy, enable encryption within the policy settings, and associate it with category assigned to the PCI DSS virtual machine. Oh, wait. Okay, and then PCI is Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, PCI DSS. Okay, and an administrator is troubleshooting intermittent network connectivity. Connectivity issues on an Acropolis hypervisor host and runs the following command: eth tool sf grep error. Output: rx missed errors, aborted, carrier, window errors, long length errors, short length errors, align errors, length errors, over errors, FIFO errors, frame errors. It looks like CRC stands for, those are CRC cyclic redundancy check. The command, so those errors are presented here. The command is executed multiple times and it's observed that cyclic redundancy check errors are incrementing. What is the most likely cause of the high RX CRC errors? B. Corruption of packet due to a faulty cable, transceiver, or physical issue. When configuring a point-in-time backup for Prism Central, for which maximum duration are restore points supported for recovery? C. 30 days. A database server has a corrupt database after virtual machine was restored from a recovery point. The database virtual machine is part of the VIP virtual machines category that is protected by a protection policy, which as a synchronous schedule after checking the state of NGT tools an administrator is investigating the protection policy, looking for the root cause of the database corruption. So NGT stands for Nutanix Guest Tools. What is the most probably cause? D. Take up consistent recovery point option is not selected. Take up consistent recovery. Okay, next question. An administrator is trying to migrate a virtual machine to a new container. The migration of virtual disks stalls. What could be the cause of this? The migration visual disk stalls. B. Insufficient storage space in the target storage container. An administrator is planning a new Acropolis hypervisor cluster deployment with multiple nodes and wants to include a cluster virtual machine IP for external access. How many IPv4 addresses should be reserved? B. 4 IP per nodes, 1 IP for VIP. Planning a new with multiple nodes. This is kind of interesting how they calculate that. IPs are assigned in an Acropolis hypervisor per node. You need 4. 1 hypervisor, 1 central virtual machine, 1 IP MI, output of band management, and 1 host management or additional service IP depending on deployment. Then you add 1 cluster virtual IP, VIP, used for external access to the cluster. So 4. An administrator needs to protect a group of mission-critical virtual machines. The business requirements are: recovery point objective must be set to 5 minutes. New mission-critical virtual machine should be automatically protected. Which data protection type supports this configuration? B. Protection policy with near sync replication policy. An administrator needs to migrate an existing virtual machine from a 3-tier XC environment to Nutanix Acropolis hypervisor. What should be used to minimize downtime during the migration? D. Nutanix Move. An administrator needs to ensure that if a host remains in a disconnected status for 40 seconds, virtual machine running on a host are automatically restarted. What method should the administrator use to ensure root file system corruption has not occurred, and that the root file system of a host isn't in a read-only state? D. Segment-based reservation method. Root file corruption. A cluster only has 1 storage pool. Even though the pool has sufficient empty space, all but 1 container are out of space. What could be the cause of this? C. Container has a capacity reservation set. Chat. So if the container is out of space, it means where is that container if it's not in the pool? it's not somewhere else. A container can have its own limits inside the pool. Pool has free space. Containers are full. Containers are restricted, not the pool. Oh, it's out of space. So it runs out of space, not run out of the pool. Okay, I mixed those two terms. What is the default compression setting when a new storage container is created in Prism Central? A. Inline compression with a 0-minute delay. What is the default compression setting when a new storage container is created in Prism? 0-minute delay. 0. An administrator would like to upgrade lifecycle management to the latest version of an Acropolis hypervisor cluster. Which steps should the administrator take to guarantee is upgraded to the latest version? B. Perform an inventory. Chat, what has an inventory to upgrading to the latest version Acropolis hypervisor? Inventory is the step where Nutanix checks what version you have and what upgrades are available before upgrading. Perform inventory means when you run inventory in lifecycle management, Nutanix scans all nodes, checks current versions, contacts Nutanix repo, lists available updates. Nutanix detects updates, you select upgrade. Lifecycle management performs upgrade. An administrator needs to expand an existing cluster with a new node that has no operating system. Only high, what is high? IP addresses are available. Out of band management, IPMI, has not been configured. Which tool should be used to image the node? D. Standalone foundation. Wait a second. Too many drinks on my desk. So, what is high? And why D? High IP is basically a typo. Host Acropolis hypervisor IP. Standalone foundation. Because of this condition, no IPMI configured. Standalone foundation imaging with only one node IPs.